nurse and her husband one of the town's first physicians, after Martha Dunn Corey, 1906, and Truman Parker, 1914. The first La Jolla Sanitarium, so-called, was presumably better than nothing, or at least more convenient than the long, uncomfortable drive by railway or Model T along the coast road into Hillcrest and the Sisters of Mercy. But when Miss Ellen's personal secretary was admitted to the sanitarium for treatment, Ada Gillespie was quick to tell her visiting employer about the need for a larger facility. Miss Ellen was persuaded, and in 1917 agreed to build her first La Jolla hospital. In all subsequent correspondence, she was very clear about her intention, despite the fact that the new structure would continue the name La Jolla Sanitarium. Several years later, when she began building the hospital to be called Scripps Memorial, it was referred to in letters as the addition to the La Jolla Sanitarium. Miss Ellen explained to her attorney, Jacob Harper, on June 14, 1917. Beginning for about a year, Mrs. S.T. Gillespie has been conducting a hospital or sanitarium in the Klein House in La Jolla. It has been demonstrated that there is local need for such an institution, but the Klein House is altogether unsuited for the work. 6 months later, after the turn of the new year 1918, land adjacent to the Klein House had been purchased, and Miss Ellen gave specific instructions to proceed. By the 1st of November 1918, Mrs. Gillespie had moved her operation out of the old sanitarium and into the new, which had facilities for 10 adult patients and 2 infants. The little hospital opened its doors in the midst of the ferocious influenza pandemic, which struck San Diego that fall and again the following spring. Ellen Scripps spoke approvingly of Ada Gillespie as a level-headed businesswoman. And for some years, the new sanitarium was called the most modern hospital in the time and was thought to have brought complete medical care to La Jolla. However, in January 1922, Miss Ellen, who liked to care for herself, slipped on the concrete floor of her sleeping porch while putting her room to rights and broke her hip. Miss Ellen insisted on being taken to the sanitarium down the street so as not to be a burden upon anyone. Her chauffeur, Fred Higgins, who drove Miss Ellen's first car, the big Pierce Arrow her brother E.W. gave her for her 80th birthday, told an interviewer, "The poor soul had been laying on her porch for probably 2 hours before anybody discovered her. The housekeeper thought it was a coyote howl. My brother and I carried her the 2 blocks down to the La Jolla Sanitarium on a stretcher with blankets over her to keep her warm. They called Dr. Thomas Berger, who was one of our leading surgeons at that time, and he came out and operated in the La Jolla Sanitarium. It was the first time she had ever been a patient, and she did not care for the role. You know, we own nearly 100 feet adjoining the present sanitarium to the south, on which a building of sufficient size to last for many years can be erected." Scripps Memorial Hospital opened September 1924 at 464 Prospect Street and was named for Miss Ellen's gentle sister, Julia Ann. 2 months later, when the local press had scarcely finished celebrating the new hospital, they were invited back to Prospect Street to admire the former La Jolla Sanitarium in its brand new incarnation as Scripps Medical Clinic. All right, so I think then I'll read you one more excerpt about Scripps Metabolic Clinic, and then I would love to answer questions if you have any for me. Scripps Metabolic Clinic. It so happened that Miss Ellen's physician, Dr. Robert Pollock, had an overriding interest in what then was called metabolic disease, a turn-of-the-century term for diabetes, as well as for anemia, high blood pressure, obesity, and nephritis. It has a different name now, as everybody in this room knows, but it was specifically that at the time. The great scientific advance of 1922, which essentially ushered in a new era of medicine, was the discovery of insulin for the treatment of diabetes by the dogged and irascible Canadian Frederick Banting and his beleaguered medical student, Charles Best. to insulin, patients with diabetes either died rapidly or, if they had funds, wasted away over months or years on starvation diets in places such as the New York Physiatric Institute, run by Dr. Frederick Madison Allen, who was the world's authority on starvation until sinking into oblivion overnight. The timing of the explosive publicity about insulin in the late summer and fall of 1922 helps explain why Ellen Scripps decided to fund two new institutions, a hospital and a metabolic clinic, nearly simultaneously. In 1923, shortly before groundbreaking for Scripps Hospital, Dr. Pollock convened a meeting of San Diego physicians at the University Club, our same University Club, to discuss the urgent building of an institution for diabetes, modeled after the highly regarded Potter Metabolic Clinic in Santa Barbara. One attentive listener was Jacob Harper, Miss Scripps' faithful attorney and facilitator of all her philanthropy. When Mr. Harper advised that the cause was worthy, Miss Ellen pledged her support. Dr. Nelson Janney, director of the Potter Clinic in Santa Barbara, was consulted by Dr. Pollock and Jacob Harper. He was enthusiastic about a facility south of Los Angeles and set out the ideal criteria for the director, which were that he have both general medical and specialized training, but not yet a national reputation, because the salary for a star would be prohibitive, and a keen interest in research and the ability to carry it out. When the next day Mr. Harper reported to Ms. Scripps the conference with Dr. Janney, she stated that she was even more interested in research work than in the treatment of individual patients, that she looked upon the project favorably and believed that she had the money to provide. The man selected as the first director, Dr. James W. Sherrill, was a native Texan and a graduate of Baylor University and Johns Hopkins University Medical School. After serving his internship as a United States Army medical officer in Panama in 1918, Dr. Sherrill joined Dr. Frederick Allen in New York City at his private sanitarium for the treatment and study of diabetes. Dr. Allen had a heavy brass paperweight on his desk inscribed, "The less food, the more life." And the Bible of Care in 1919 was a manual entitled The Starvation Allen Treatment of Diabetes. The following year, Dr. Allen moved his operation to a large, lush estate in New Jersey with an Italianate mansion of magnificent proportions. Dr. James W. Jr., son and namesake of the first director of the clinic, said, "My father was working with Frederick Allen at the Institute where all the people in America who could afford it went for treatment of their diabetes. When insulin was discovered, Dr. Allen sent my father up to Toronto to work with Banting and Best. So my father learned about insulin and brought it back to New Jersey and was in charge of it there. When Ellen Browning Scripps decided she wanted to build a clinic in La Jolla, she sent for some men to be interviewed as director. People came from around the country, got on trains, and came out. Never one to waste time or money, Ellen Scripps simply transformed the now empty La Jolla Sanitarium, Will Hebbard's pretty little building with the artistic pergola, into the Scripps Metabolic Clinic with 20 beds. Doors opened 4 months after Dr. Sherrill arrived on December 11, 1924. The professional staff consisted of 2 physicians. In the first year of operation, 2/3 of the beds were filled. Miss Ellen wrote with satisfaction in January 1925, "The newly established metabolic clinic has transcended the predictions of its most enthusiastic supporters." So I'll stop there with the readings, but tell you that the book goes on to talk about the development of Scripps Memorial Hospital, La Jolla, the Metabolic Clinic, meanwhile Mercy Hospital growing up independently downtown, Scripps Encinitas, and Scripps Chula Vista, and then comes around to the rejoining of all of these parts of the system in the new millennium. So I hope this has given you a taste for what the book is about and that you'll pursue reading the rest of it. Thank you very much, and I would be delighted to
of them must have brought home some stimulating stories about her experiences with those cantankerous male surgeons. Present company accepted.
She did. But she, you know, one of the reasons I think Anita Figueredo was so successful as a surgeon is that she never took offense. Even, she would say occasionally she thought people intended to be offensive, but usually they didn't. Of course, when she did her training, she was actually, the story of her doing, of how she became the first oncologic surgeon, one of two, I should say to be more accurate. She was already a medical school graduate in New York City. She had gone to Long Island College of Medicine and was a graduate, and was doing a residency at the New York Infirmary for Women and Children, which was the only place in New York at that time where women residents could go. And she thought, she loved surgery, and she thought she would do gynecologic surgery because that's a, and so she had already had some surgical training and was already down the block in New York when the Memorial Hospital for Cancer and Allied Diseases, which is now Sloan Kettering, realized that they were losing all their male residents to the World War. So she graduated in 1940. And of course, you know, we know what happened in December of 1941, and then all of a sudden, all of the male residents were being taken away. So the Board of Managers of Memorial Hospital had to look around and find two women. And so Mother and a friend of hers who were both already doing surgical training down the street were invited to come. That's how she got into that. And then it was such an amazing story. For one thing, she looked about 16 years old. She was about 4'11", and this very pretty, tiny little thing. And so it was astonishing enough to have a woman surgeon coming in, never mind that she looked like a teenager. And so this caught the eye of the press. And so the photograph that Nick put up was part of a Look magazine issue of 1941, showing her representing the women at home. So thank you for allowing me to talk about that book. Can I answer any other questions about either one of them? Yes?
Where can we buy the books? Did you bring some today?
Well, we didn't bring a trail of light, but thank you for asking. Yes, we have good company right here. My friend Nick Pence from the marketing department at Scripps has bought books, so you can buy them right here. How much are they selling for?
We're pricing them at an employee discount of $15 because we figured a lot of you probably worked for Scripps at one time, so you still can get that discount. And if you don't have cash today, you can sign up on the list and we will send you a bill.
And I would be glad to sign it. You get them here.
How many of you were affiliated with Scripps at one time? Any other questions? Dr. Eastman, thank you so much.